My name's Dave Kalin, property owner out in the Charlotte Ranchettes. Own a small bee farm out there. I want to thank you all for your time today. I'll be as brief as possible. I've been kind of asked by the community to come in and speak for the Ranchettes. I do have a little bit of a background. I was a commissioner in the state of Pennsylvania, so I'm very well versed in zoning and building and everything that entails in that, and I thank you all for your endeavor in this because it's a thankless job. With that being said, we have recently had a rash of code violation complaints, some founded, some unfounded, some almost to the point of harassment. We put out a petition on change.org, 120 signatures so far. We'd like to change the way that zoning violation complaints, code enforcement complaints are filed to be no longer anonymous. If you're going to file a complaint, you need to put a name. It's going to take the complaining neighbor with no complaint at all out of the equation. Or we need to work out something else because it's becoming expensive for the county, which is our tax money. It's also becoming a nuisance for most of us out there in the area. One of the big issues pertaining to this is 2 years ago this very board did change the zoning in that district to agricultural from ag estates with the uses and rights thereof with the zoning of agricultural. Unfortunately, code enforcement has not got that memo. They are telling everybody out there, if you want to run a hobby farm, you want to run any agricultural business, you want to do anything out there that's agricultural related, you are required to change your tax code at the assessor's office to an ag exemption. That is false. Florida law does not stipulate that. It is a zoning use by right in the agricultural district to run a farm, hobby farm, or a bee farm. Other issue we're going to address is MSBU. This board did deny the increase in the taxes for the MSBU this year. I thank you for that. It's a mismanagement of the funds out there right now because it's not being managed properly. We've pulled some private estimates together. We can do the maintenance out there at the same cost and provide 3 times the level of maintenance. We'd like to take it back to the citizens and dissolve our MSBU board and the Ranchettes. South County Drainage. They're part of the MSBU out there. They are not doing their required maintenance. We need this board to step in and require South County Drainage to step up and do their portion. With Hurricane Irma, we had an infrastructure failure on George Street, which is one of the leading culverts into the Ranchettes. We had 2 feet of water out there. That's never happened before. A lot of damage occurred. That needs resolved, and it needs resolved quickly. Now, my last comment, I'm going to try to be brief. It's come to my attention code enforcement may be using satellite imagery for code enforcement violations. That violates the 4th Amendment. I'd like to finish that speech for a few seconds. That does violate the 4th Amendment. The Supreme Court has ruled that satellite imagery cannot be used in any legal proceedings.
We'll research that, but I do need to cut you off. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Does the government work for us or do we work for the government? Tonight, what if the Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could declare war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event? The Constitution be damned. What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I'd like to thank you for all your years of support through the years. As a result, this channel has grown and allowed me an equity partnership in carmarshal.com. Please take the time to check them out. They help you buy and sell your next car, even have a negotiating tool to save you from the hassle of haggling with multiple dealers. The link is in the description below. Please click and help support and give if you can too through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks again.